Welcome back to Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, president of Dale Carnegie Training Japan, and my guest today is Jeremy Sampson, the Japan head of Robert Walters. Welcome.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much.
Joining us.
So, Jeremy, for our audience, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got to Japan, how you became a leader here, Robert Walters, what do they do, that type of thing.
Sure. Okay, well, where do I start? I guess I'll start from the very beginning, but originally I'm a boy from the bush in countryside Australia, actually, a little town called Boona, and I think, as you know, you and I went to the same university, so graduated business at Griffith University in Queensland, and then from there, I guess my first experience in the business world was working for Hilton Hotels. So I worked for Hilton Cairns up in North Queensland, and really that was my first sales job, and sort of got me into, started me off on the path of where I am today. And so it's also what really brought me out to Japan in the first place. So through university I had a lot of experience in hotels, in waitering and bartending, but once I graduated and got my business degree, I was given an opportunity within the hotel I was working for to be doing conferencing sales and event sales. So, and interestingly, that was specifically to Japanese tour companies. So I was working in Cairns for Hilton Hotels, selling packages, selling entertainment events, seminars, etc., to Japanese inbound tours. So that's really what gave me my first major taste of doing business with Japan. So I had customers like major Japanese tour companies, so HIS, JTB, Kintetsu, etc. And I think that experience was probably what first set me on path to move out to Japan. So I did that for about 2 years. Like many coming out to Japan, my first job out here was teaching English. So I survived that for about 5 months.
Were you weren't a jet?
No, I was with Nova many years ago. So, and I realised soon after getting into that it wasn't for me, and I wanted to be in Japan. I wanted to get into, really start a career here. And by pure chance, I met somebody who introduced me to Robert Walters. And so
a fellow recruiter, perhaps, a recruiter.
He was a recruiter who recruited me, absolutely. And how many of our employees end up here through referrals and introductions. And so I started off as an associate with Robert Walters back in 2005. It was so. I was fairly new to Japan still at that point, and the recruitment industry was very, very different to what it is today.
How big was Robert Walters back in 2005 when you joined?
Sure, back then we were about 50 people.
How big is it today?
So we're about 350 people now.
Wow.
So we've seen a huge change over those years, which I'll get into in a little bit. So I guess I started my career with Robert Walters around 14 years ago, and came up through the organisation, mostly recruiting in the manufacturing, heavy industries, energy, chemical related areas. And so my first introduction to management and first introduction to leadership, I was promoted to start the new team for the business, which was the sales and marketing industrial team.
That doesn't sound very sexy.
For me it was. I was very passionate about that area, and I think that's what made me do very well in it too. I had an interest in the mechanical parts and how things work, how things operate, from cars to factories and plants, and of course for Japan it's a huge market, and so that really interested me. And I spent a few years before growing that market for the company here in Japan, and was given the opportunity to establish a team and become manager of that team from October 2008.
Does that mean that you recruited a new team fresh outside of the company or from inside the company to make that team?
So initially there were a couple of recruits already within the company who were hired sometime after me to focus our efforts on developing that market. And so I'd worked with them for 12 months plus by the time I took on that position, which is another leadership challenge in itself, is making the transition from peer to leader or manager. But the timing was probably what was most interesting for me. I was promoted to manager in October 2008.
Oh, what could possibly go wrong?
Which was, yes, as I'm sure you know, right at the very beginning of the global financial crisis, and especially in the space that I was covering, the manufacturing, heavy industries related areas, which was one of the heaviest hit also. So my entrance into management was probably one of the most difficult times that many of us have faced in our lifetime. But I'm actually, in hindsight, extremely grateful for it. And
what did you learn from that? I mean, you're a new manager, you've got some peers to manage, let's talk about that. But also, at that time of the global financial crisis, what made managing more difficult for you?
Well, to be honest, I didn't have the experience before that, so I didn't have any benchmark or anything to compare it to. But what I really found difficulty, well, firstly, was the fact that the market was completely dead. So there was, despite ongoing, sales and recruitment activity from our part, there was very little, response in the market. And trying to drive results, or trying to drive my own performance, but also trying to improve the performance of other consultants too, in a market where nothing is happening.
How do you do that?
Extremely frustrating and extremely tiring. And to be honest, it was a very, very challenging year for myself and for the team. But I can't say that we really succeeded that year. It was a year of transition. It was a year of learning, and I think what we were able to do was really instill great habits, great processes, great discipline, so that when the market rebounded in 2010, we were in a fantastic position. In 2010, 11, 12, that team was one of the highest performing teams in Robert Walters Japan.
But you managed to survive for 2 years in an industry which is very results oriented, up or out in a lot of cases. How did you manage that?
Yeah, I think survive is probably a key word there. And, I think the company was well aware that, the situation we were in, and that the efforts were there. And, I think one of the things that Robert Walters did through that period is we stuck with it. We stuck with our people. Of course, like a lot of companies, there were some cutbacks, but we were also preparing for a rebound at some point. So, we were grateful that we didn't cut back too deep. And as a result, when things did rebound, the business was in a really strong position to continue, on that sort of to be the market leader.
So 2005, you were 50 people. 2008, how many people? 2010, how many people?
I couldn't recall the exact numbers off the top of my head, but I think before the global financial crisis, we peaked at probably around about 170, 180.
So you grew quite quickly from 50 to 170, 180.
We did.
In 2 years.
I'd say they were really the boom period of recruitment, then probably from the mid-2000s to pre-Lehman crash. And then I guess there was a couple of years of resettling. And then it's been a very positive and strong market over the last several years also too. But going back on what I was saying before, I think the company was aware that things were going to rebound, and we didn't want to cut back to the bone too deeply, and knowing that we wanted to position ourselves to be in a good place when things did rebound. And from there it was onwards and upwards.
Did you keep your team going though? Because commissions, bonuses, probably not great at that time because there's not much income coming in. How do you keep them motivated?
Correct. And it was challenging. And I think everybody that year, not just here, but probably most companies, took a bit of a hit when it came to remuneration from, especially performance-based remuneration. But I guess one thing that worked in our favour to some degree, and whether it's a positive or a negative, that there weren't many opportunities out there in the market. Right, so there weren't many with our clients, there weren't many with our competitors. So, if someone had a job through those times, they were going to stick it out and commit to it. And I think we really used that time to really refine the way we work. And that, as I touched on briefly before, that's how I really learnt the importance of, as a manager, as a leader, to really lead by example, to lead from the front. And the leader role in Robert Walters is really a player manager role. So you're not sitting on your throne directing people. You're really sort of getting out there on the front line with clients, with candidates, with your consultants. And so I really learnt then just the importance of really leading by example, taking the initiative myself, showing everybody that I was in the same situation as them and working my absolute butt off. But also came back to really creating discipline, instilling good processes. So I think in good times we often relax the management controls, the processes, the good things that we have because things are going well. We tend to relax a little bit as long as people are hitting the results and hitting numbers. But then as soon as things get tight, then we have to reel it back and try and re-implement those controls and processes that we've lost. So
how do you keep those during the boom times then?
That's the challenge. It really is, and it's something that we've been trying to work on and communicate over the last few years too. Because, as I said, it's more difficult to instill or maintain the good things that you do in the good times. Because if people are performing well, sometimes they're given a little bit of slack or they're given a little bit of leeway, and that's fine. That's the way they work, and if they're delivering results, it's perfectly fine. But that can really in the long term hurt you, I think too. So it's largely creating the awareness in the leadership team, in the managers, and being aware that not letting standards drop when things are good, and just maintaining and insisting on high standards, regardless of what the market conditions are like.
How do you not get into micromanagement?
Yeah, fair question. I think a big part of it to avoid micromanagement is, as I said before, leading from the front. I mean, if people see that you're doing the same things that you're asking others to do, I think that is quite powerful and impacts people, and people really, follow suit. Micromanagement, I think largely has quite a negative connotation, and within rights too. But I think in many cases, micromanagement is important. For example, with a new starter, if somebody is within their first 6 months in the job, they do need a fair bit of micromanagement. They need somebody overseeing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, giving close guidance, and really steering them throughout their day. But when you're dealing with more experienced people who know what they're doing, then there should be a lot less micromanagement. But I think it's being able to ultimately set goals for people, making sure that people understand what your expectations are, what you expect of them, and then giving them the flexibility or the autonomy to go away and do that. But I also found that to reduce the need for that is just creating accountability in people. So I did find a lot that when you maybe give direction or ask somebody to do a task, if you never check back in again, quite often they'll see that habit form and know that not going to check in, so I don't really feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it. But what I found is really just conditioning the employees and giving them targets, giving them goals, giving them initiatives, checking in whenever the deadline may be, or a week later, a few weeks later, in the next one-on-one catch-up. How did you go with that? And when people know that you'll be checking in to see how something went, it creates accountability and there's more responsibility to do what's asked. And I think if you can create that accountability, there's less need to micromanage.
Are the Japanese more diligent?
I think they're very diligent, more diligent. I don't think you can necessarily generalise by nationality or culture there, but I think Japanese definitely have a reputation for being very diligent, very hardworking.
Well, my point was, if you're giving them, you've got a mixed group here.
Yep.
If you're giving the Japanese something to do, and maybe you are not following up on it, are they more likely to do it, or it doesn't really vary across the board?
You're right. I think Japanese are probably more diligent in that sense, that they will be more likely to do it. But maybe another thing that's worth pointing out here, that when I look at our organisation, I think you could be mistaken for running an organisation almost anywhere else in the world. So, of the 350 odd employees that we have here, we have about 40 different nationalities. 50% are Japanese and 50% are non-Japanese. So, we definitely don't operate, and I definitely don't feel that I lead a typical Japanese organisation. So the insights that I would, of the experiences that I have here, may well be quite different to your typical traditional conservative Japanese company.
How did you bridge from manager into senior manager?
Sure. So again, coming off the back of the global financial crisis, and the team that I was leading at that point, the industrial team, I said really, we came out of that extremely strong. The team operated extremely well. We had some great people, and all the things that we'd worked hard to instill on the team in the difficult times really worked and excelled in the good times. So from there, it was really for us about specialisation. And at that point, there were 3 team members towards the end, one Japanese, one half Japanese, and another British, actually. So quite a mix of different backgrounds. So we came out of it quite strong. All the processes, practices, discipline we'd put in place, it worked very well for us. And from there, it was more about specialisation. So it was really targeting the market we were going after, which at that point was really the manufacturing space, and really getting greater depth and specialisation into that core market.
With just that same number of people?
Initially, and as we grew, as we became more successful, we added heads to that, and from there we split off further specializations in areas like chemical was the next specialization. I think a year after that we split off another specialization, which was energy, and then another year after that was the automotive sector, and so we grew purely through specialization. And we'd typically try and structure the team where we'd always have 1 or 2 people focusing on these new areas where we were trying to grow and develop and specialize in, and so that basically formed the seed for new teams.
So coming back to how did you grow your team? You said you specialized and you added people. So how big did that over group get for you?
Sure. So that specific manufacturing coverage that started with 3 people, as we grew team by team over the years, we got that to full coverage of about 20 people.
Okay.
And then I also from there I became an associate director. So ultimately, I was overseeing 4 teams in the specialist areas.
So how many people altogether?
So from there, that was probably my next step as associate director, was overseeing probably at that point was about 20 people actually. But from there I was promoted to director, and that's where I inherited our supply chain and logistics functions, and also our accounting and finance functions. And when I first took over as director, we were about 28 people at that point. And then over the next few years, so that was 2014 that I was promoted to division director of about the team of 28. It was one of our 4 divisions here in Robert Walters at the time. And then from when I stepped up to take over the position of MD, which was in 2018, we'd grown that division to about 55 people.
Are you doing business with Japan? Do you really know how things work? Japan Business Mastery provides the answers. Do you have the right networks and know how to create them? Do you know how to get on the same wavelength with Japanese buyers? Do you know what being trustworthy looks like from the Japanese perspective? Japan Business Mastery is based on more than 30 years experience in Japan and will become your go-to guide. Want to succeed in Japan? Buy Japan Business Mastery now. How did you go about scaling up from 428, and what did you need to change in your leadership in that scaling up process? Because you're not with 4 people anymore, you're sitting way above that.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I faced, one of the things I tried to be conscious of, was leading a team of 4 people. It's very easy to have very close personal relationships, very close connection with the team members, and really have more influence over them, be able to have more influence over their training, over their development, and even over the sort of their mindset and their approach to their work. But of course, as it scales and gets bigger and bigger, it's more difficult to have that same level of interaction and connection with a bigger team.
So what do you do about that?
Well, another step there too, it becomes even more difficult, I was going to say, is when you then have management layers in between yourself and the consultant level too. So as an associate director, you typically have a manager under there. And then that was one of the challenges that I found, is learning to lead through other people also, rather than just leading directly.
How do you do that?
I'm still figuring it out to some degree, to be honest. But there is an element of just accepting it to some degree. I think you have to appreciate and realise that the message that you communicate to one level does sometimes get diluted or distilled or somewhat adjusted as it goes down a few layers. But being conscious of that, I think, is then ensuring that what you communicate is received appropriately, right? And ensuring that the message I've communicated.
How do you ensure that?
Most likely, probably asking for confirmation, receiving feedback back, asking questions, clarifying questions to ensure that what's the message that I've put out has been received in the intended way.
So, when you go from being a director to the MD, organisations getting quite big by that stage. How many was it?
So, probably around 300.
300, right?
Yeah.
And the previous MD had been in that position for a long time, in fact, forever, as I remember.
8 years, yeah.
8 years, right. So, you haven't been in the organisation all that long. How did you manage to get to become MD? And then what were some of the challenges you had to succeed someone who'd been in the job for a very long time? You're relatively young. I've got no idea how old you are, but you seem young to me anyway. And then you're in this very big position. How did you adjust all of those things? So how did you get to become MD? What were some of the challenges you had of having someone in place a long time before you, and then also relatively being young?
Yeah, when I first became a manager, I was 27 years old, I think. And I won't be shy about my age, so I'm 38 years old now, and when I became MD of Rob Walters, I was 36 years old at the time. And for me, it was definitely a big step and a huge transition. So what did I do to get there? I think really driving the division that I was running was one of the most important things. I think I'd had a proven track record of success. I'd grown the business successfully. But I think one of the other really important things, I was able to develop quite a stable leadership team. So I had a good structure of management, senior management under me. I had a good, stable team of people too. So there was fairly limited turnover.
How did you manage that? Because if I look at your competitors, some of them I met, maybe 30, 40 people became 300 people. And people are moving around. You meet them in one networking event and next one they've got a different card, So there's quite a lot of movement going on there. How did you manage to keep your team stable?
Yeah, well, quite honestly, as you know, the industry by nature does have fairly high turnover, as you know. But for me, it does come back to to engagement, and really for me it was about one of my very, very simple management or leadership philosophies is just hiring good people, developing them well, and keeping them happy. And really that's what I tried to do as the leader of that division. I of course want to hire good people, the best I could find, but it's really about developing them well and making them feel like they're growing, they're expanding, they have promotion opportunities, progression opportunities within the business, and keeping them happy. Keeping them happy can mean many, many different things. It can mean just paying them well and making sure that they feel like they're being taken care of financially. They enjoy where they work. You're providing a good environment, a good atmosphere and culture that they enjoy coming to work every day just as much as I did. I think another thing that is, I'd like to think of myself as being a very people-oriented leader. And
what does that mean?
For me, I really care and I'm very genuine, I believe, with with all of my team members. It does get more and more difficult as you're leading a larger and larger organisation, but as I mentioned before, one of the things that I found difficult or struggled with as my leadership role grew is maintaining that connection, that sort of personal interaction with people. And as a leader, that's something that I've always prided myself on and tried to maintain. So as a division director, I guess for me, it was really just being genuine, being authentic with people, letting them know that I am there trying to help them grow, help them develop their careers, develop their skills, and really just providing that culture and the environment for them to grow and have enjoy what they do.
How about you take over from David? We both know David, another Aussie, and here we've got a whole bunch of other division directors, or division heads, I should say, who didn't get the top job. And suddenly this young guy, relatively young guy, hasn't been with the firm all that long, gets the top job and they don't. How do you deal with that type of problem?
I don't know how much I can get into right now, but one thing I will say...
Well, it's more about the challenge for you, not necessarily the political machinations inside the company, but you're going into the job, I got it, they didn't. How do I keep them engaged? How do I make sure that they don't, head across to the opposition?
Yeah, sure.
Or do you want them to head across the opposition?
No, of course not, absolutely not. But one correction I'll make there also is that, I have been with the business for quite some time. It's been 14 years that I've been with Walters in Japan. So, and in fact, all of the directors here in Walters Japan, we've all worked together for 13, 14 years, and we've worked side by side all that time and come up through the organisation together. And so, I mean, that's been one strength of us, and I think one thing that's also helped me make that transition, that we really had a mutual respect for each other, and I think we all felt that whoever got the position, the relationship we had, we'd all be supportive of each other. But in making that transition, I think same when I'm going from being a consultant to managing my peers previously, I think it's really important not to come in and try and assert yourself from the early stages. You really have to ease into the role. There's a lot to learn, and I did not want to. I don't think there's anything to gain from trying to assert your authority and show, okay, guys, I'm the boss now, and this is how it's going to be. It's more. I spent quite a lot of time just taking the time to understand various aspects of the business, trying to understand the various different divisions and their challenges, their opportunities, and their focus, whilst not meddling, not trying to get involved, but possibly offering support where I can. Then there's also the whole back office element of it too. So running a sales division to then overseeing all of the back office functions, including finance, legal, marketing, technology.
You're quite a different animal from the sales world, aren't they?
It's a very different animal, absolutely, and it's been an amazing learning experience, but one that I'm still continuing to learn, and something that's made the job extremely interesting, and those are functions where I definitely can't come in without the background, without the experience, and start trying to tell people how to run a finance department or a marketing department or anything like that. So. Back to the original point, it's just really easing into it. It's learning from them. It's being a partner with them as much as possible, up until a point. And then there does become the point comes where you do have to sometimes make a firm decision or send a strong message as the leader. But I've always believed that has to happen organically and through time, and it shouldn't be forced.
How do you build trust?
Probably going back on what I talked about before, for me, trust is really about being authentic with people and just being genuine.
You wouldn't meet many of those 350 in a day.
I would meet quite a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. And the types of interactions you're going to have are going to be fairly small. Time is always of the essence here. So my point is, when you've got a big scale organisation, the ability to be authentic, the ability to try and build that trust becomes much more marginalised time-wise. So how do you overcome that problem of having much less time, a lot more people to deal with, and trying to build that sense of trust?
I think it starts a long way before that. I think it really starts with the interactions I do have day to day with individuals. I don't think you can go out en masse and try and build trust, with 350 people in one room at one time. It really does go back to the relationships you formed in the years leading up to it, the way, the trust that you have with the senior management team, and of course if they have trust in you, and that then filters down to their leadership team and the way that they show that they trust in me, and every conversation I have with everyone at every level, I'd like to think I'm genuine, I'm authentic, I'm caring, and really listening and understanding people's. But there are opportunities where I have to present to the entire office, and whether it's a monthly results wrap up, or for example, just last week we had a management offsite, and anytime I have an opportunity to give a presentation, I really do try to, in my message there, in my presentation, be as genuine and authentic as I possibly can. I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. I'm really, I guess, continuing to send a consistent message, and I try to share with people what my real core views and beliefs and mission for the business really are, and I just try and stay true to that in all of my words and actions offline too.
So you've got half of the team are Japanese, half are non-Japanese. Is there a different approach or an additional approach needed for gaining trust with the Japanese side of the team?
I'd like to think that gaining trust sort of transcends culture, language, nationality, but I might say that it can potentially take a little bit more time to build trust with Japanese compared to foreigners. But I could also say that the typical Japanese that we hire aren't necessarily the typical Japanese either. Everyone here is very bilingual, speaks English, many of whom have lived or been raised overseas. So the typical employee might not be similar to your typical employee you might see at a major Japanese Nikkei company or something. Yep.
And so what about engagement? I think many companies have engagement surveys, staff satisfaction surveys. Do you have those things? What have the results been like?
We don't have a formal one that we do on a regular basis. Over the years, we've approached it in different ways. Over the last couple of years, there's been one particular approach that we've taken, which has actually shown positive results. So we've participated for the last 2 years in the Great Place to Work awards, and this is a global body that recognises basically employee engagement and what a firm is like to work for. And so we were awarded. Is it a survey of the staff? It is. So I think they surveyed last year around 200 employees.
That's a lot out of 350.
Yeah, quite a large sample of employees, and the questions, there was over 100 questions, all related to culture, employee engagement, and employee satisfaction. And as a result of that, we were very proud to be awarded the number 16 in the Great Place to Work in Japan in the mid-sized company category, and that covers all companies, Japanese and Gaishikei, and we've just been awarded in 2020. So that's of course it's great to be awarded that, but back to the original point was that's probably the type of surveys that we've done recently. We've received some of the results, or all of the results, back from that, and it's given us greater insight than we may have previously seen.
And what things, therefore, are you doing to increase engagement, particularly given it's a very competitive industry at the moment? There's lots of requirement for staff with experience and tons of poaching going on, I'm sure, and engaging people is one of the ways to retain them. So what are you doing to retain them through engagement?
Yeah, for us, engagement, it all comes back to our culture, and I think it's something that we've driven from when we first started 20 years ago. But we do continue to do new initiatives and continue to improve the business any way we can, because for Robert Walters, I mean, our business is our people, right? We're not a manufacturer, we're not producing anything, so our people are our greatest asset, and so we really need to do whatever we can to make sure they're engaged and they're enjoying what they're doing, and they're growing. And a lot of it does come back to what I mentioned before about really hiring good people, developing them well, and keeping them happy. And if I break that down a little bit, and when it comes to developing them well, I think we've really invested a lot over the last several years, but traditionally in our consultant training, but also leadership training also.
And you do this internally, or?
The majority of it we do internally, absolutely. And so, we from the day one, we're investing heavily in the development of new consultants. And some of these come as new graduates that obviously require great investment, and sometimes we hire people from industry. Typically, we don't hire so much from competitors.
Why?
For us, it really comes down to a couple of points, but our DNA and preserving our DNA largely, especially at the leadership level. We don't like to bring in anyone from a competitor at the leadership level, because we really do believe strongly in our Robert Walters DNA. And probably without going into too much detail, but we haven't seen a huge level of success from people that we've hired from competitors. So I think the Robert Walters model is really about hiring high potential people and developing them well. And I do believe that if people feel that they're growing, if they're continuing to develop, and if they see development opportunities, I think that's really, really core to employee engagement. And the second part I mentioned there as well is the keep them happy. So we do a lot as a company to try to provide a great work environment for our guys. Whether it's the simple fun things from company parties, Hanami and great Christmas parties, to Friday drinks on a Friday afternoon where everyone gathers to blow off some steam, to some actual initiatives that we run. For example, we've fairly recently launched a wellness committee. And so this is a committee that they plan activities related to sort of health and well-being, because these days for engagement, it's not just about going out and getting pissed. So there's, especially in the younger generation, there's a lot more focus around health and well-being now. So we have a committee dedicated to arranging activities. It's completely voluntary, but giving people the opportunity to engage with other people across the business, and meet and build relationships with others, because that's also important in a big company of 350 odd people. And I think also on the engagement front, making them feel that they're a part of something, right? That their work really matters, and the jobs that they're doing is really making an impact. And I think we've really seen that that's a huge factor, especially in the millennial group too. But I think it really applies to everybody, and that is a part of my messaging. And I firmly believe in Robert Walters here that we are really making an impact. And I believe our business, we're helping Japan to become more global in many ways. So we're helping Japanese professionals to compete and succeed on the global stage, and we're also helping companies in Japan, whether Gaishikei or Nikkei companies, to also be more competitive and more successful. So I personally really do believe and have conviction in what we're doing as an organisation. We're making an impact in Japan, and I really want our employees to feel that they're also a part of that and really making an impact.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. You get that balance between you driving people on revenue, and are they making decisions for the candidate or the company in their best interests or on the revenue side. We've just seen Japan Post Office just being hammered by the FSA because they were pushing their salespeople so hard. They started doing many strange things with insurance policies to get the revenues. And so here you've got a culture driving revenue hard, which then gets activities and behaviours which then get hit by regulatory, or compliance issues. How do you strike that balance? Because there's tons of rhetoric about we're helping people, bloody, bloody, blah, all good. But there's also that strong drive on bringing in the money. So how do you actually work it out so that it's credible? So when you say, we believe we're helping people, but we say that, but actually we're driving harder on the money. So that actually what you're saying and what you're doing becomes lined up and credible. How do you keep that balance?
It's a fair question, and one of the key differentiators in how Robert Walters is very different in how we operate is that our consultants aren't paid on a commission basis. So we're not driving people to.
How do you pay them?
So we pay them more on a team-based. It's a team-based profit share model. So what that means is it's not just every man for themselves trying to make a commission, trying to hit their targets. It's a team working together, collaborating together, and all for to ensure that we provide the best people for our clients, and that we're providing a broad range of opportunities for the candidates. So what it means is we're able to work with clients and give them a greater range of candidates. So we're not just trying to force people on them that are only owned by a particular consultant. And at the same time, when we meet a candidate, we're able to provide them with opportunities from the whole cross-section of the market, and there's no ownership there. So what it means is the teams are really working together and collaborating together for the best result for both the client and the candidate. And absolutely, people have targets and people push for that. But I think we've also learnt over the years that if you try to force the wrong person into the wrong job, or you try to force the wrong job onto the wrong person, it's long term, it's not sustainable, right? And that doesn't work out for the candidate, the client, or us. And so we try to, like in everything we do, we try and be genuine in the way that we approach that, because it's damaging for us and everybody else if we're just trying to push things for the sake of results.
You sit up at the top of the company, and you're like a lot of CEOs, preaching, philosophy and principles. The issue is always, is that actually percolating down to the very bottom? So the newest, youngest, freshest person joining the company understands this is the thinking, this is the culture. How do you make sure that actually goes all the way to the bottom?
Sure. I think there's a few approaches that we use for that. First and foremost is a part of our induction training process. I actually conduct the very first training for all new starters on their very first day. So day one, I'm presenting to them. I'm introducing the company, our values, our leadership principles, and really how we operate and how we work. So that's where it begins. And I think across the leadership team, we all have the same values. And I'll talk about our leadership principles in a moment too. And it is instilled in all parts of the induction training process. On top of that, so I typically will have a coffee catch-up with all new starters when they've been here for around 6 to 8 weeks, and it's my opportunity to check in with them, have a casual chat with a group of maybe 5 or 10 people, understanding how their experience has gone so far in the training. But I use that as an opportunity to reinforce those values of mine, of the business, and just try to remind people to keep those on the forefront of their mind. And I referred to earlier the leadership principles. So we went through a process probably 5 years or so ago of creating for Japan and Northeast Asia our Robert Walters Japan leadership principles. And these are a collection of principles that really do guide our culture. They guide how we talk, how we think, how we work, and they aren't just slogans written on the wall. They are words that we use in day-to-day communication. I've probably referred to several of them throughout our conversation already today, I've consciously or unconsciously. But we do try and instill these, into all levels of the organisation, and they are, around the business for people to see. But as I said, it's about communicating them, talking about them, and actually them being a part of the day-to-day language and day-to-day actions, not just slogans on the wall.
So you've got 350 people, you've got 50% population is Japanese, non-Japanese. Are the management ranks reflective of that? So would half of your leadership team be Japanese?
Yes, probably. I couldn't give you the exact figures right now, but we have a fairly good representation of Japanese management also, and also female representation too. So I think we have around about a third of our management team is female.
Okay, that's quite
including
a big proportion.
Japanese females.
Big proportion in Japan.
Sure.
And part of engagement here is the connection with innovation. How do you get innovation here?
Well, actually, we just came off the back of a Friday leadership offsite, and a big part of that was brainstorming and trying to innovate on certain areas of the business, how we can improve certain things. And I think maybe in Japan there might be a tendency that people aren't necessarily just going to put their hand up, not going to come out with their own ideas and drive them. But we found on Friday, for example, at our leadership offsite, presenting questions and challenges to the group of leaders. But then I found breaking it down into smaller groups. If you ask somebody for ideas or suggestions in front of 50 of their peers, you're not going to get people speaking.
Especially if you're Japanese.
Exactly. So one thing that again it's sort of become tradition for us, and we do it a few times a year, is we go off site and we break into smaller groups. We break into sort of 8 or so groups of 5 or 6 people, and get them brainstorming together. And that way, there's whether they're Japanese or non-Japanese, if they're less inclined to speak up and give an idea, if they're in a smaller group, and a lot of people are throwing around different ideas. Some very productive, some possibly ridiculous, but I think it does create more of more comfort for them to speak up and give their ideas. And on top of that, when it does come back to sharing these ideas with the broader group, it's not singled out as to whose idea that was or where it came from. So
how do you avoid that?
Well, we'll have a spokesperson share all the ideas from that particular group, listing them all up. So no one idea has a name behind it, and so we collect all the ideas, and then we go through and look at what can be implemented and executed on. And
how do you make those decisions? Because you've got input of the group, but at some point you've got to make choices between options. Who makes the choices?
Sure. So typically we'll go back and look through all the ideas, and often we, depending on what the topic might be, we have pages of ideas, and from there typically it's myself and the directors here. We take the time again, typically off-site, to review them, thinking, is this valid? How could it work? What could we do? And we'll talk through all of it. Some of it may require further exploration with possibly other departments, but we will go through every single one and assess its viability and look at how we can then go and implement.
So I've asked you a number of questions on leadership. Is something I should have asked you?
Probably lots of things. Leadership is a very, very big topic, but I don't have all the answers right here. But I think in Japan we're always talking about the talent crisis, right, and the shortage of labour. And I think it's right now 1.6 jobs for every job seeker. But I think what's not spoken of, and again I don't have an answer for this, but just something I think about is the leadership crisis too. We talk about the huge lack of talent shortage, and there's not enough people to put in all of the jobs in Japan, and I think it's even further exaggerated when you look at leadership. I don't think there's any company out there that is 100% satisfied and feels they have a full roster on their leadership team. I think that's a challenge that Japan's going to continue to face. It's not just about labour shortage of the operators, the salespeople, the engineers, the line staff. It's also a major talent shortage at the leadership level.
How do you find leaders to suit these companies looking for leaders? Where are these leaders?
We have a lot of different avenues and ways that we approach people, and of course, quite often the best leaders are the ones that are quite happy in their employer, in their company, and often we'll have to approach them. And interestingly, I just came off the back of a press conference for our salary survey, and some of the data that came from that was that of a survey we ran of 2,600 respondents in Japan, white-collar professionals, 79% indicated that even if they're not looking for a job, they're open to job approaches. So that's a good thing for us in a way, in the sense that it makes it a little bit easier to approach potential talent for our clients. Of course, we don't approach people from other clients at all. But I think what that also indicates, and another challenge for leadership in Japan moving forward, is the job market is really becoming more mobile. Candidates are becoming more mobile, and so this engagement piece that we touched on briefly is becoming more and more important every single day. When there's just not enough people in Japan to fill all the vacant jobs, there's always going to be gaps.
So if you're going to give some advice to someone who's freshly assigned to come to Japan, the wheels are landing at Haneda or Narita right now, what would be some maybe 3 pieces of advice you'd give them about leading in Japan?
Number one, I would probably say take some time to learn the Japan landscape and understand how the business works in Japan. People always talk that Japan is different, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. Don't helicopter in, try to instill headquarters way from the outset, and feel that it works in headquarters or it works in whatever country I've just come from, so this is how it's going to work in Japan. I think you really need to learn the landscape and tread carefully in the early days. Beyond that, I think also that employee engagement piece is important. So really to build that trust and give people a real sense of purpose in Japan. There's been that concept in Japan of job for a lifetime, work for life, and that's really shifted in recent years too. So I think employers, whether are new to Japan or you've been here for some time, I think you really need to pay close attention to that employee engagement and look at what you can do, what initiatives you can take to increase employee engagement. And thirdly, I'd probably say build a network. There's a lot of people, a lot of foreigners that have been here for a very long time and have some great experience. And bounce off people. I think the international business community here is very open, is very welcoming, and there's a lot of great people. It's something I continue to try to do. I try to get out to networking events. I try to build relationships with other leaders, for sure. Regretfully, I probably should have done more of it in my earlier years. But something I'll continue to do, and hence why I recommend that others do also.
Okay, so thank you very much. This has been another episode of Japan's Top Business Interviews. Jeremy Sampson from Robert Walters, Japan. Jeremy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Been a pleasure.
We look forward to catching up with you again at our next episode.